Perfetto. Ok, prego Caroline, you in control now.
Okay. Okay, here we are. All right, I can see 4 people at the side, but hello to everybody. It is the 700-year celebration. For me, I've been doing quite a lot of presentations on Dante at various points throughout the year, but I think also for me, this is the last presentation of the year, so it is in that sense rather special, but special for all of us. It's been a fantastic year, and there's been so many wonderful events all around the world, and it's just been so inspiring to really sort of immerse ourselves in the Commedia this year. But I just wanted to say a little bit about myself, apart from what Gianluca's already said about my background, which kind of in a way might give me a little bit of preparation for exploring the Commedia. I've got a background in transpersonal psychology and comparative mythology and mysticism, but I'm also have got a lifelong affinity with all things medieval, and I've had that oddly since I was a child. As an adult, I've adapted and taught courses on several of the major medieval romances, like Quest for the Holy Grail and Gawain and the Green Knight. But over this last 2 years, and particularly this last 18 months, I really delved deeply into Dante and been focused on Dante and the Commedia, and I've produced and still am in the process of producing a series of YouTube presentations and also teaching the classes. So it's been a wonderful year, but there is something also that might equip me to look at the story that I wouldn't normally confess. So it's a little bit of a secret passion of mine, but I think as Dante is sort of exploring the afterlife, my passion is for reading about and listening to accounts of near-death experiences. And it's surprising, you know, I've listened to and read hundreds of them, and it's just so surprising how similar Dante's exploits in the afterlife, and particularly in this canticle of the Paradiso, are to the reports of near-death visions that people have, you know, after having a heart attack and their heart is stopped for 10 minutes or whatever. They come back with amazing stories, not that dissimilar to Dante's. So without more ado, the question is tonight, did he go to paradise? So let's see what he says in his own words. So beginning at Canto 1, Paradiso, Dante writes, La gloria de colui che tutto muove, per l'universo penetra, e risplenda in una parte più, e meno altrove. The glory of him who moveth everything, penetrates all the universe, and shines more brightly in one part and elsewhere less. Within the heaven which most receives his light I was, and saw what he who thence descends neither knows how, nor hath the power to tell. For as it draweth near to its desire, our intellect so deeply sinks therein, that recollection cannot follow it. As much, however, of that holy realm as in my memory I could treasure up, shall now become the subject of my song. So that's really what he's telling us at the very start of the third canticle. Now, what we are listening to here, says Helen Luke in her beautiful book, Dark Wood to White Rose, she writes, is not only some of the most glorious poetry ever written, but to a story and the story of an ordinary flesh and blood human person like ourselves, whose love grows and expands into divinity and deepens and contracts to a single point, so that his whole being is drawn as by a magnet to a vision of God. It's unbelievable, she continues, that he could have written his account without experiencing, however briefly, a mystical revelation. Now, I must confess right at the beginning here that I do rather favour this, this idea that Dante was in fact more than a poet, genius poet though he was, that he was also a mystic, and that his Commedia was a divine revelation, and that he did indeed glimpse paradise and bring back the story for us. So I want to ask you to settle back for a whistle-stop tour of the third canticle, focusing primarily on the final few canti or verses at the very end, where he really does describe his experience in great detail. So, just to bring us up to speed, we're remembering now as we meet him tonight that he's already seen the deepest pits of the inferno, and he's seen humankind in its most degraded form. Behind him too is the arduous climb of atonement up the mountain of the Purgatorio. Behind him too, at this point, is dear Virgil, his guide, who came to find him in the Inferno, took him all the way to the earthly paradise. He's now been reunited with Beatrice, his beloved, after many, many years of grief. And now, finally, at last, his soul is free to soar. So all my notes, I just say at the outset, all my notes are actually on the page. I've done it as a kind of storybook presentation. I'm thinking to turn my YouTube presentations into a book next year called Dante in Quest of Paradise. And so these are extracts from what is the last chapter of that. So, still in Canto 1, Paradiso, slightly further on from where we were, we hear that soon after the spring equinox, Beatrice gazes into the sun, and Dante, he sees its fire reflected there, and as heavenly music sounds to rise up from the earthly paradise, which is where we left them in March. And they travel by intention alone, as we do hear so often reported in near-death experiences. And there's instantly telepathy too, another thing which we hear reported. And these two things come into being as soon as they leave the earth realm. Now, this third canticle of Dante's The Paradiso is really going beyond, and it's going beyond in a way on several levels. So we're not just going beyond and leaving the earth and going up through the heavenly spheres. Dante is going beyond with staggering quantum leaps of consciousness. So it's totally different to what he observed in the Inferno, where, if you remember, the souls there were utterly without any insight. They had no idea how they might have ever been complicit in their own downfall, and they're just going round and round and round, aren't they, forever, ad infinitum, for eternity. In the Purgatorio, they have a chance to stand back and have a look and try to bring a balance and a healing and an atonement to their predicament. But in the Paradiso, Dante is going to be graced with a cosmic understanding, and he will come to see in the Latin phrase subspecie eternitatis, which means literally from the perspective of the divine. So although he's, you know, in a sense having this literal journey, he's also having this deep expansion of consciousness too. They're going to visit each of the 7 planets of the medieval Ptolemaic solar system, which is, of course, the pre-Copernican version. And in turn, they're going to go to the Moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and the fixed stars. And then they're going to go onward to the prima mobile and the incorporeal realm of the Empyrean, where then Dante will enter the heaven of pure light and he will experience the blissful unity of all. But of course, in so short a time as we have available to us tonight, it's not possible to go canto by canto, sphere by sphere. So as I said at the beginning, I just want to focus at the very top of this diagram here, at the last 2 heavens, cielo stellato, cielo cristallino, and beyond that blue line there. The blue line that you can see is actually the end of the material universe. It's the end of space. It's the end of time. And beyond that, there is only the pure heaven. So I just want to focus there, but it's still a really long way to go. So there are 2 really, I think, really special moments in Paradiso 22 and 27, where Beatrice says to Dante, turn round and just have a look from where we've come. And she says to him, we've crossed the universe. Look back now, and soon you will know much joy. And Dante looked back, and he saw all the spheres they had visited. And he saw the earth. And you know, at that point, he saw all the way back to his own lost and fearful self in Canto 1, Inferno. And he looks at the earth and he says, that threshing floor, he tells us, that makes us all so fierce. But he's beyond that now. He's way beyond that now. And all he can think about is Beatrice and turning back to her. And he writes, my enamoured mind burned more than ever to bring my eyes back to my lady, for nothing compared with the divine delight which shone on me when I turned toward her smiling face. Maybe we can all remember such moments with our loved ones. And her love for him at this moment is literally is said to propel him into the embrace of the 9th heaven. And the angels sing Gloria in excelsis Deo as they move and merge into the light. So instantaneously they arrive in the prima mobile, il cielo cristallino. As I said before, it's the very last outpost of the material world. And I suppose in a sort of science fiction modern context, you might kind of understand this heaven more like a bit of a plasma portal, you know. Obviously Dante hasn't expressed it like that, but in a way it is a bit like that, because they're going to move between the manifest world and the unmanifest world. It's called the crystalline heaven because of its translucent nature, and the prima mobile, the prime mover, because of its infinite, incredible speed, from which all the lower heavens take their vibration, take their slower motions. But it's also a gradation of vibration going down, down, down to the lower frequencies experienced on the earth as opposed to the heavens. It is where the manifest world and the invisible worlds meet and mingle and merge. And it is at once the last degree of time and the first degree of eternity. as the French philosopher Henri Corbin has so beautifully and poetically attempted to express his mystery. And I think the person that painted this modern drawing, this modern painting here, has also done a very good job. Now, the canto begins with Dante gazing into Beatrice's lovely eyes, again, we might note. And he sees there a single point of light, which is so acute, he tells us, that anyone faced with the force with which it blazed would have to shut his eyes. And of course, it is the first glimpse of his ultimate and final destination. Now, on that point, Beatrice tells him, depend the heavens and the whole of nature. All reality round its fixed centre moves, but in this height where God is, all the love and all the light, there is no other where. And here, writes Christian Moves in his excellent book, The Metaphysics of the Divine Comedy, Beatrice is directly quoting Aristotle, and she's referencing his classical assertion that beyond the material universe, beyond matter, beyond form, there is only the divine mind, only consciousness, only light and love. And beyond that, the lady says, there is no other where. Well, Dante calls this point the pure spark of being. And from here, Beatrice tells him, God pours his love throughout the entire creation, and did so instantly from the very first moment, as in as in crystal, or in amber, or in glass, Dante writes. A shaft of light diffuses through the whole, its ray reflected instantaneously. And of course, this is an incredibly poetic way of referring to what now, from a modern scientific point of view, we would all call the Big Bang. And as Beatrice speaks, Dante becomes aware of 9 radiant rings of light streaming forth from that central point of light. And they are the 9 celestial choirs of angels. And they all dance and they all sing Hosanna. From choir to choir, Dante explains, toward that fixed point which holds and will hold them forever. But Dante is perplexed. He notices that the rings are faster and smaller the closest to the center, which is actually an inverse configuration to that he has understood thus far, where his greater vision has been accompanied by a greater expanse of space as he's journeyed outward from the earth. But now it seems, as he moves between the manifest and the unmanifest realms, he has to turn his vision inward. And Beatrice, always wanting to help him understand, sees his confusion, and she seeks to explain this mysterious relationship between these 2 orders that he's now perceiving. And she says to him, if you wish to be satisfied on this, take what I tell you and wrap your mind around it. It's very contemporary language, isn't it? But of course, it's exactly what he has to do. And it's exactly what we have to do if we're going to follow him through this next little bit, because it is quite difficult, but also simple once it's understood. I think I understood it via the near-death experiences, where you often hear of people You know, they rise up above their body, and they look back at the earth, just in the same way that Dante has done. But then they turn, and suddenly they see their relatives coming toward them, and their relatives are come clothed in robes of light, and the relatives guide them then to turn around and look toward a point of light toward which they lead them. It's so similar to what Dante has to do at this moment, and is so similar to where he now is setting off. And suddenly, because as we know, he is a great genius, he understands, he gets it, and his perspective shifts. And the realization dawns that his outbound journey through the heavenly spheres, with the starting point of the earth, is also, in some incredibly mysterious way, also an inbound inner journey to the center of the soul. And of course, this is what we very often see in mythology. We see what looks like a literal outer journey that's really a journey to the center of the soul. And as this realization dawns on Dante, the angelic circles, they glitter with sparks of molten iron, and they sing Hosanna once again. And then instantly, Dante and Beatrice rise up to the Empyrean, their final destination. And this is how it's happened all the way through, right from the first terraces of the Purgatorio. Dante has ascended by means of understanding, by means of expanding his consciousness. So it looks like he's going up a mountain, and he is going up a mountain on the literal level, but he's going up a different sort of mountain in terms of the expansion of his consciousness. And every time when he gets toward the peak of a new understanding, he shifts, and he's instantly at the next level, which is where we find him now. He's moving very rapidly now to the center of those celestial choirs, to that bright point of light. And one by one, the angelic circles are fading and disappearing from view, because the light that they're going towards is even brighter. It's kind of putting them all in the shade, if you like. So here we are, we're at Canto 30, Paradiso, where Dante and Beatrice famously enter the Empyrean. And it's beyond time, it's beyond form, and yet to Dante, it's more real, it's more alive than anything he has ever known. And Beatrice here, and this has been happening throughout the Canticle of the Paradiso, she becomes even more beautiful, and her smile becomes even more radiant and even more lovely. It's almost as if it can't get any more lovely. We have come into the heaven of pure light, she tells him, filled with love, filled with the love of true goodness, filled with joy, joy that transcends every sweetness. And Dante, at this point, he bathes his eyes in a river of pure light, and a great radiance enwraps him. Look upon our city, his lady tells him. How beautiful it is. And Dante looks, and he sees the beautiful white rose beyond, symbol of purity, of love, and of beauty. And the souls of the blessed are there assembled. And their faces, he tells us, are all of living flame, and their wings of gold, and the rest of them so white that snow could never reach that limit. Canto 30, of course, is famously where Beatrice will take her place when the two souls part at the end of this canto. But for now, she continues to explain so that Dante fully understands what he's seeing. There's still room within the rose, she tells him, for souls still yet to come, and maybe even souls from future spiritual dispensations. You know, we've already met back further down in the heaven of Saturn. We already met several pagans already high up in the paradise. So, you know, Dante is quite controversial here. But he's completely enraptured, and he's looking on and he's bathing in the shining light that's issuing forth from the company there. And then he turns back, just like he did in Canto 30, Purgatorio, when he turned back to tell Virgil how wonderful what he was seeing was, and he had disappeared. Now Beatrice has disappeared. She's no longer there. And instead it's an old man in her place, and he's Bernard of Clairvaux. And Bernard will take him onward here, just as Beatrice took Dante onward from the heights of the Purgatorio. Now, commentators like Luke, who we referenced at the very beginning, have seen this important transition as a reflection of Dante's integration of his anima, his own inner feminine aspect, which has been represented since he was 9 years old by Beatrice, when he first caught sight of her on the banks of the Arno, back on the streets of Florence as a 9-year-old boy. He's been in love with her ever since. She is, as the Jungians would say, she is the representation of his inner soul, his anima, if you like. But the old man is a classic representation of the archetype of the self, and he will lead Dante onward to his final vision. Oh, but Dante's really shocked to find that she's gone. Where is she, he says, to which the old man replies, Beatrice brought me from my place to lead your desire to its goal. And if you look up, you will see her again on that throne that her merit has marked out for her. And I raised my eyes without answering, and I saw her making a crown for herself by reflecting the eternal light from her person. And then, in this very poignant scene, Dante speaks to Beatrice for the last time. And he says, O lady, in whom my hope has life, and who for my salvation suffered to leave your footprints in hell, I recognize the grace and virtue of all I have seen through your power and your goodness. And then, in the only moment in the entire Commedia, he addresses her with the familiar tu. Tu mi hai di servo tratto e libertate. You have drawn me out of slavery to freedom. And she, though far off as she appeared, she smiled and she gazed at me, and then she turned toward the eternal fountain. Well, St. Bernard tells Dante to look then more deeply into the petals of the rose, and he sees the radiant souls of the blessed assembled there. St. Francis, Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, Adam, the first man. but many female figures too, Sarah, Rebecca and Judith from the Old Testament, and also Santa Lucia, who had carried him up to the adamant gate on the mountain of the Purgatorio. But Eve is also here, and she's sitting at the Virgin's feet. And we can only imagine Dante's contemporaries maybe being a little bit shocked, as indeed some people might be today. And yet, as Mark Vernon points out, Eve's presence here completes the doctrine of the Christian dispensation. The one so beautiful at Mary's feet, St. Bernard then tells Dante, is she who opened and made the wound, which Mary closed again and then anointed. It is an image that, in one sense, fuses together the beginning and the end of the biblical story in order to reveal its inner unity, its divine order and harmony. Eve is not now just merely other and fallen, but she's also blessed, also mother, and honoured as the first soul to set foot on the path of salvation. So the preponderance of all these female figures throughout the Commedia should not really surprise us. These are the anima figures, like Beatrice, as we already said, who represent these inner feminine aspects of the psyche. And, we often find in all sorts of myths and legends and fairy tales the world over, that male questers are frequently searching for this lost inner feminine soul in order to rebalance themselves, in order to rebalance the collective in which they're living. In fact, the Sleeping Beauty is a perfect example of this quest for the discarded, the forgotten, the hidden, lost feminine beauty. Though sometimes these male questers, they fall victim to the negative pole of this archetype. As bless him, Dante has fallen victim to it on several occasions along his way, as we saw much earlier on. He's on the right path now, though. Anyway, back to the tale. Canto 32, Paradiso. St. Bernard then bids Dante to look even higher. And here he sees at the extreme edge of the rose the glory of the Virgin, the supreme symbol of the feminine in the medieval world. And Bernard turns his eyes toward her with so much love. He's a very famous devotee of the Virgin from the Middle Ages. And kneeling, he begins to pray. And every soul there present prays with him also for Dante and for his final illumination. Lady, you are so great. In you is tenderness. In you is pity. In you is generosity. Now he who has seen the lives of souls one by one, from the deepest pool of the universe, even to here, begs you of your grace for enough strength to lift his eyes higher toward his final bliss. And the celestial choirs sing, as you might imagine, Ave Maria, gratia plena, Hail Mary, full of grace. And the story tells that the Blessed Lady did not speak, but she rather turned her gaze to focus upon the heavenly rose. My vision then was greater than our speech, Dante says, which fails at such a sight, and memory at such an assault. I am like one who sees in a dream, and when the dream is gone, set there remains, an impression set there remains, but nothing else comes to mind again, but the sweetness born from it still distills inside my heart. And in those depths I saw ingathered and bound by love into one volume all things that are scattered through the universe, substance and accident and their relations, as if joined in such a manner that what I speak of is one simplicity of light. And it is a light that both knows, is known, and is the knowing. And this is the experience of unity described by mystics from all spiritual traditions across the globe. Then Dante continues, because it's just like a meal that keeps on getting better, these last bits. Then, in the profound and shining deep being of the deep light, 3 circles appeared entwined, so that one could not be distinguished from the other. And it is the famous Trinitarian unity that, of course, the whole poem is a reflection of. And this notion of the 3 is so central to Dante's vision. It's 3 states of being, 3 canticles, 33 canti, apart from the Inferno that has 34. And they're all rendered in Dante's 3-part rhyming scheme, the terza rima. And as we've seen, Beatrice appears in Canto 30 and Oratorio, and departs in Canto 30, Paradiso. And there are those who have speculated that the Trinity is also seen reflected in the comedy in 3 evolutionary phases of consciousness, with perhaps the Inferno maybe representing the Old Testament with its wrathful, punishing God, maybe the Purgatorio representing the New Testament with its compassionate, forgiving God, and the Paradiso, the incorporeal realm of love and light, with its angelic host and its redeemed feminine principle. 3, of course, is the framework of the entire poem. It's woven into the fabric of its creation on every possible, conceivable level. We're coming to the end now. As Dante peers into these 3 circles, he sees the face of God illumined there, and that of humanity too, and he sees them as one and the same. In God there is humanity, in humanity there is God. In Dio c'è l'uomo, nell'uomo c'è Dio. How on earth, he thinks to himself, can this possibly be? And at last, he tells us, he's thrown totally beyond his capacity to understand. He says, I was like the geometer who sets himself to measure the exact circumference of the circle, and who cannot find by thought the principle he lacks. And so was I at this new sight. Oh, I wished I could see how the image fitted the circle, but my true wings had not been made for this. Then, in a great flash of understanding, struck my mind, and suddenly its wish was granted. And at this point, power failed high fantasy, but like a wheel in perfect balance turning, I felt my will and my desire impelled by the love that moves the sun and the other stars. L'amor che muove il sole e le altre stelle. You know, after these are the last lines of the Commedia. But after this, you know, he does come back to earth. And a few canti before, he actually prays that he's going to be unable to bring this back for the people yet to come. So I wanted to kind of end with that prayer that he makes. It's his prayer, so he can bring it back for us. He says, "O light beyond light, exalted beyond mortal thought, grant that in memory I see again but one small part of how you then appeared, and grant my tongue sufficient power that it may leave behind a single spark of glory for the people yet to come." And as we stand here now, 700 years later, I think we can all safely say that that prayer has been answered. So I want to end with a really deep, deep final bow to Dante Alighieri, il nostro sommo poeta, our supreme poet, as he is so affectionately known in his home country. And you know, in a mythological context, he is the hero par excellence. He has completed the perilous journey, the deep inner quest and exploration of the psyche, as Joseph Campbell so famously describes for us all in his book, Hero with a Thousand Faces. And in so doing, Dante has shown us all a way through the deepest darkness imaginable, and he's taken us to the highest heights of the soul's joy and its fulfillment in the ineffable light. La Divina Commedia is the treasure brought back from this great quest, bequeathed to all of us in perpetuity. Thank you very much for your attention.
You clap.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Really, really, really interesting talk, and really enjoyed very, very much. I'm going to stop the recording now.